Five Nights at Freddy's puppet has a pretty dark theory string to it, and if it's true, might create a brutal narrative and have serious character and story implications. This is the puppet stuff theory that claims some really interesting stuff that the puppet did. A lot of this theory came from Five Nights at Freddy's 1 and 2, mostly Fnaf 2. It's one of those older theories that gets brought up every so often, and I have to say, I think I have some hot takes over this theory, and what's interesting is that since this theory doesn't hold up as well anymore, it's kind of toned down the puppet's character, because with this theory, what the puppet did is pretty messed up for a child to do. It's basically canon that the puppet in Fnaf 2 is possessed by Charlie, or Charlotte Emily, the daughter of Henry Emily, and is still a kid, potentially being the first victim of William Afton, depending on the timeline you follow. So disclaimer for this video, a lot of lore in FNAF is naturally pretty disturbing surrounding the safety of kids. I think due to how popular Five Nights at Freddy's is, it's hard not to be desensitized, but the content of this theory is pretty dark. I think it's important for the narrative to treat the subject matter's tone accordingly. At the end of the day, children lost their lives in the story, having been lured by William Afton. And to downplay that is to downplay the significance of their revenge in the story towards him when they possess the animatronics. And this theory is all about revenge. While I'm excited to talk to you about the narrative and plot around the puppet theory, if you're sensitive to this sort of stuff, you might want to skip this video. My name is Arcade, and this is Theory Review, where I cover your favorite or least favorite FNAF theories. Puppet Stuff claims that the puppet was the one who stuffed the bodies of the children from the missing children incident in the original animatronics after they were victims of William Afton, to force them to possess the animatronics. The strongest piece of evidence for this is in the Give Gifts, Give Life minigame that occurs in FNAF 2, randomly after getting jump scared, where you play as a puppet to attach the masks of the animatronics to the kids. Under the theory, this minigame would be explaining how the puppet put the children's bodies into the suits, giving life to them by allowing them to come back to life, almost, by possessing the animatronics. The notable exception to this theory is the child who possesses Golden Freddy, which could be for a couple of reasons. People have theorized that Cassidy, who is probably the other child, was spring-locked into the Golden Freddy suit already by William Afton, which explains the twitching and weird imagery with Golden Freddy. But that's a whole other theory that's not too relevant to this one. Obviously, Golden Freddy is a unique case, so it makes sense that their possession might be under a completely different circumstance, and it doesn't tear down this theory completely. Normally for these videos, I cover all the evidence, then counter evidence, and then lastly the narrative and the story. But for the sake of this video, I think it's best to cover the narrative that this theory presents before getting started with the counter evidence. A lot of the counter evidence is pretty straightforward or has to do with the plot inconsistencies, so it'll be easier this way. The final piece of context needed for this theory is about Charlie possessing the puppet. The puppet was created by Charlie's father, Henry Emily, who designed the puppet to protect her, and keeping an eye on her by tracking a green wristband that she wore. Supposedly, Henry did this because he was suspicious of William Afton, as they were both partners at the time who ran Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, and was concerned over the safety of his daughter. But the extent of that really depends on the timeline. Anyways, the puppet briefly lost track of Charlie, and then found her dying in the alley behind the restaurant, and held her in their arms as she died. Through physical contact, Charlie's soul was now able to possess a puppet. At some point, Charlie realized she was possessing the puppet now. So what exactly does this theory bring to the story, and how is it dramatically different if this wasn't true? You might not expect it, but a lot of the plot changes depending on who stuffed the animatronics with the children. I should also mention that the children being hidden inside the bodies of the suits is canon with how they possess the animatronics, but there is pretty disgusting imagery behind it. I mean, whoever did it, it's still a disturbing thought that is tragically normalized in the FNAF community. With how much I'm talking about it, I hope I don't get demonetized. I mean, I don't exactly pull the same numbers as someone like Math Hat, so if you want me to cover your favorite or least favorite disturbing FNAF lore, make sure to subscribe and comment down below. For this theory, it's important to keep in mind that Charlie is a kid, one who suffered an intense tragedy by a horrible monster. Upon coming across other victims, instead of letting them pass on, she deliberately stuffed them into the suits of the classic Freddy Fazbear's animatronics, knowing that they would come back to life and haunt them. That is such a terrifying thought to imagine a child doing, not only with the bodies, but with the act of knowing the basic rules behind possession. And it really wasn't out of ill intent towards the other children. Now there's a couple reasons as to why she did this. Some people think it was out of just trying to help out the other children by making them come back to life. Remember, this is the reasoning of a child. A bit of a darker one is that while she does want to help the other kids, She also wants justice and revenge against William Afton, and she can't do it alone. It could have been just taking advantage of an unfortunate opportunity, and I think under that narrative, it makes the puppet a more nuanced and interesting character. With either reason, I don't think a child that young would comprehend just how terrible being unable to pass on peacefully could be. By doing this, the puppet trapped the souls of the other children, maybe for good intentions, but forcing them to live under horrible conditions. And I think that makes for a compelling and tragic story. It makes the children's spirits finally being able to move on in the end a more impactful moment, because maybe after a while they were rightfully consumed by vengeance, and letting go of that hate became increasingly difficult. I think this theory fleshes out the puppet's character, and even the other animatronics to an extent, in a way that gives her less of a black and white moral compass, and a more realistic gray one where she had a more grounded reaction to the horrible fate she suffered. I think these new layers for the character make her stand out. Of course, she wasn't thinking ahead of what will happen by making the other children possess the animatronics. Instead, I think she was doing what she thought was right, given that she's a child who probably wasn't thinking long term. That is a really cool story. It shares an interesting insight into a cool character. Unfortunately, the more we talk about plot, the more plot holes open up. Okay, so the main problem with this theory is that it goes against William Afton stuffing the suits himself to hide the bodies, or to experiment with how the remnant or possession works depending on what theories you follow. And honestly, on a technical level, it makes more sense for William Afton to have done this. He needed a place to hide the bodies. I mean, I guess he did just leave Charlie out in the alley, but the thing is, in the books and movies, it was all William Afton who stuffed the animatronics. However, how does this explain the minigame? Well, people have theorized that the minigame is more of a spiritual or metaphorical interpretation, where the puppet just helps and guides the souls to possess the animatronics in a smoother and clean way. Because she didn't do this with Golden Freddy in the minigame, it would also explain why they aren't as put together. The main point is that the puppet was trying to help the spirits for the same kind of reasons as before, by trying to help the other victims. It's just that this is kind of boring. Like, don't get me wrong, it's an interesting concept, it just cuts out a lot of potential for the puppet as a character. Under this interpretation, she's more of a protective figure, but loses out on some of the agency and gray area that uses revenge or justice as motivation. If this puppet stuff theory is true, it also turns William Afton into a less interesting character. In a lot of old timelines, it's important that he is the one who hid the bodies in the animatronic suits, whether intentionally knowing that they would get possessed in order to study a remnant, or to get away with it as to hide the evidence. If the puppet did stuff the suits, then William Afton would lose a lot of interesting character implications that could make for a good story. But here's my hot take. I think it'd be worth it. Neither of these options are bad, they just create different stories with a different focus. If William Afton stuffed the suits for any reason, it would give him a more active role in the story, as it ends up with the children possessing the animatronics because of him. It would also make him eventually getting spring-locked a fitting fate for his character, which is really compelling. If the puppet did it, then it would give her and even the animatronics more of a role in the story, because they would have a motivated goal to get revenge on William Afton, which is also compelling. On the puppet's part, it would create a reason for the animatronics to come to life, and even give her a nuanced goal, because it asks questions about her character that is up to the audience to solve. Is she wrong to get justice? No, but was it right for her to force this fate on other children in order to stop William Afton? That's where it creates an interesting character, because different people would have different opinions on her doing this, and ultimately it makes sense that she sees this action as a good thing. Maybe over time she could even struggle with the consequences of this. As for the rest of the counter evidence, I think the story redirected its focus a bit after Fnaf 2. From what I saw about people talking about the books and even watching the movie, William Afton is always the one who is responsible for the animatronics getting possessed. Even in the games, his character is explored more, like in Sister Location, and a lot of theories and stories rely on him realizing the rules behind Remnant. The answer of the question to who stuffed the animatronics relies on how you interpret the minigame, give gifts, give life, whether you see it as literal or spiritual. I really like this theory. As much as it opens up criticism and events that happened, the story and characterization that it gives the puppet is tragic. I like interesting storytelling, which is why when even looking at FNAF theories, it's a huge point in my videos to focus on the narrative. If Five Nights at Freddy's was ever actually solved, as much as it would make everyone happy, it would also have to be a good story to keep everyone satisfied. Probably not, but it's definitely a result, as when I researched this theory to see what people thought about it, There was a lot of discussion which boiled down to people liking the story with the puppet being responsible. But is this theory true? Probably not. I don't think it is with the evidence I've seen. However, feel free to discuss in the comments. But regardless, I do like it. At the end of these videos, I always rate the theories for fun, and I'm giving this theory 8 Freddy Fazbears. This theory does have disturbing implications for what the puppet did, because stuffing bodies of children into robotic suits is a wild thing for a child to do. But it's not the most disturbing FNAF theory out there. A lot of these videos come from you recommending theories in the comments. If you have an interesting theory that you want me to cover, subscribe and comment your FNAF theory in the comments. If you want to see a really creepy theory, I made this video on FNAF's sister location that you might be interested in. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, I hope you're a bit less bored.